Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our Monday interview show. I am very excited for our very special guest here today. Her name is Carolina Garcia Jayaram. Love the last name. We were just talking about this incredible name, which we'll share in just a moment, what it means in Indian culture. And she is an amazing woman who is a trailblazer in the space of philanthropy. She is the founding director and CEO of the Elevate Prize Foundation, which identifies and champions entrepreneurs and activists around the world, providing unrestricted grants totaling over $5 million in funding, services to 10 winners who are driving transformative change around the world. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Carolina. And I feel like it's a really timely time for us to have this conversation, given the global environment and the collective, and just in my work right now, centering on the heart with my new book, just bringing it back to practical ways. How do we serve? How do we show up? How can we use our energy for good in the world? So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Kim, for having me and for, first of all, for creating this platform so that those of us who want to reach more and more people with these messages of doing good in the world and what a purpose-driven life can look like can reach more people who are looking for those kind of avenues and outlets. So I really appreciate you inviting me on.
So how did this become, we'll dive right in. How did this become the focus of your work? This, what you're doing right now, which is, not specific to one thing, but looking at how activism is going, working across several different, fields and giving your life to this. Was there a life before this? And you mentioned you're a mother. How did you get to this part of your life where you're really focusing on this now?
My whole life, since I can remember being a small child, has always been in service of some kind and very much in service to, I guess, what you call the underdog, kind of the people in the world who were overlooked and overseen, but who were sort of secretly the bedrock and the blood life of the world, And so for many years, that looked like working with artists. So for over 20 years, I was doing similar kind of work, helping artists realize their greatest potential and bring them tools and resources that they could use to become autonomous and more powerful in their own right and bring their, beautiful ideas and creations to the world. And it was extremely fulfilling. But as you just kind of made mention of, the world kept getting more complicated and darker and more problematic. And I felt like as much as I love the arts and I love artists, I needed to shift my attention to social impact because it was where I needed to spend this one wild and beautiful life on trying to leave something better for not just my children, but all of our children. And so around 6 years ago, I made a really intentional turn from the art world into the impact world. And it wasn't one that I knew a lot about, quite frankly. And I took almost a year off in between these sectors and I embarked on what I called my year of yes. And I did all kinds of things that I never thought I would do. I became a yoga teacher, even though I had practiced for many, many years. I sort of took that to the next level. I did a lot of things that brought me greater clarity about how am I going to go into this new world and where is all the work and experience that I've had going to find a place here to make a difference. And so the universe brought me Joe Deitch, who is the founder and the sole funder of the foundation. And he had this, his background is in finance. He's a Boston guy, like very different background than my own, except the fact that he too had been on the spiritual journey for a very long time. And the itch he couldn't scratch was that here he was, this self-made guy, very wealthy, and he wanted to do good in the world. He wanted to put his money and his philanthropy to good work, but he literally couldn't find the entrepreneurs who were really making a difference in the world. And he didn't know why, because he didn't come from philanthropy. And he was like, the only thing I can get is like CNN heroes. I don't know where to find these people. And I said, well, there's a real systemic issue why you can't find those people. And it's the way that funding works. Funding does not allow, most of the time, restricted funding does not allow nonprofits to use the money for marketing, branding, PR, all the things that, you wouldn't launch your book, let alone a lipstick, let alone a solution for climate change without a whole marketing, strategy behind it. The nonprofit sector simply doesn't have those tools. It doesn't have the resources for them. And as a result, they are really limited in what they can do. So I said to him in that conversation, if you're willing to put a serious investment into visibility, we can really move the needle, because nobody is touching visibility in nonprofit right now and social impact. So lo and behold, within a year, because we're both such entrepreneurs, we're like, how quick can we do this thing? We turned it around. We built the first prize, was launched 6 months later, right as COVID was launching, by the way.
Wow.
At the same time, we co-launched with the pandemic. And that was both kind of, to us, was a blessing in some ways, because I think it reoriented the world toward what's our purpose? What's our meaning? And what's the purpose of fame and having a platform, if not to do greater good in the world? So it helped us build our brand and then find these incredible leaders who we started investing in and really heavily investing around visibility. So these 10 winners every year receive, during this 2-year fellowship, $300,000, which is unrestricted, which was very important to me because I knew how difficult those unrestricted dollars are to come by. And then a 2-year academy where they get, the best in training around, social media, public speaking, media training, branding, everything you could possibly need to sort of take that solution to the next level. So that's where it started 5 years ago. It'll
Got
be
it.
5 years ago in a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm.
So what's really, interesting is you're talking about it, just talking about what you're really passionate about. There's this energy, there's this vitality that's just flowing through you. And you and I were talking a little bit about Indian philosophy a little bit earlier. And in my new book, The Hidden Power of the Five Hearts, Carolina, which is about awakening your heart more and more, there's this fifth heart stage known as the clear heart, which is where we open our heart to the universal heart. And it's very different concept from the Western typical hero story, which is I wake up to my power. It's like the Die Hard movies where, I can save the world, I can save the building, like it's in me, versus when we step into this expansion, which is more, there's an energy and a power moving through me. Right.
Exactly.
So we open up to something greater. And what's really inspiring about your story, because you mentioned, you reiterated, you shifted, you're a mom, and now you're doing something that you found, you use this word purpose. So we can go into that for a moment. In my last book, which was called You Are More Than You Think You Are, which was on Yogananda's teachings, purpose is something that we talk about, we hear about a lot in society, it gets tossed around on social media. And sometimes we think purpose has to look a certain way, or we start to feel like I don't have the same I just can't define it as a certain person. And, this other person has something so clear. How Yogananda talks about it is, first of all, on a greater spiritual level, the purpose of life is to awaken self-realization into who we are, spirit within, the energy. And then secondly, to tap into those unique gifts and how we can serve the greater whole in, different ways. Like sometimes the linear mind is like, oh, this is bigger, this is better, this may be a bigger organization, this, whatever it is, just like our mind is like, well, I'm not going to volunteer at the soup kitchen all, weekends, like I can't serve. So for anyone listening to this, and it was like, wow, Carolina's got funding, she's doing all this stuff, like she really has a clear purpose. I'm bring home and I'm struggling to keep my, my family with 3 kids just going. And we all, busy moms, like there's dishes and there's the realities of driving my kids back and forth to school. What would you say to them? What would you say to anyone listening about tapping into their unique way to serve and purpose in the middle of their life right now?
I'm so glad you asked about that, because that's actually the real vision of Elevate. So the reason we're called Elevate, the sort of vision behind everything, is that it's a consciousness awareness practice, right? It's a calling for us to, how do we elevate human consciousness? Well, we elevate human consciousness by feeling we do have purpose in the world. And how do we get people to feel that they have purpose in the world? Well, one of the surest ways that we've done for millennia and generations is through storytelling, right? Like having somebody who's giving us this example of purpose. Like you said, people can look to me, well, she has all these things, but I might also inspire someone to do some good in the world, or I might give someone a pathway to do more good in the world. And that's really the purpose of making good famous, or making the winners that we select every year famous or better known, isn't just to scale their solutions, of which they're incredible, of course, and very worthy in and of themselves. It's actually to build what we call the first global fan base for good. So the fan base, which would be whether you're a fan of Waira, who does food insecurity work in Kenya, or you're doing, climate change and water rise in Bali. Those stories reaching new audiences gives more and more and more pathways to how somebody could make a difference. And I think what we do in the West a lot, especially, is because of sort of the capitalist structure that we're born and raised in this country, is everything has to be big. Everything has to be scaled. If you're not impacting millions of people, it's not
Yeah.
worth it. And we aren't
Well,
able to
you're
kind
not
of,
serving
yeah,
unless you have created a
right.
foundation.
Right, unless you've created a foundation, and that's again how philanthropy set up too. What's the impact you're making? How many lives have you saved? How many? And a lot of that's really smoke and mirrors anyway. It's almost impossible to measure. And what I wish people would get back to is one life changed, one life impacted is the most miraculous thing you could ever be a part of in your life. And let's bring it back to that. Let's bring it back to what you can do. Can you mentor a child in your neighborhood? Can you do a beach cleanup if you live at the beach? Can you take God, for those who have kids, bring it into your household in some way. Impact is made every single incremental moment of your day. You have a moment to have an impact on someone's life around you, of smiling at a person without a home on the street and making them feel seen. That's something anyone has the power to do. And these are the things that reverberate, that have an incredible effect way beyond anything you'll ever know. And I think that's what we as humans need to feel comfortable with, is that we may have an effect we'll never know about. And that's beautiful. We don't need to even know it, and if we all can kind of let go of that need of evidence-based philanthropy, I think people would feel a lot more empowered to take on more good.
Beautifully said. And I like how you, first of all, like you mentioned, the stories and just showing that each of us, we're all ordinary and we're all special at the same time, right?
Exactly.
So, whatever position we may find ourselves, student, mom of 4, or, whatever, just, stay-at-home mom or lawyer or whatever we are, there's this choice, this orientation for life towards how can I help? How can I serve? So, with your examples about, funding for some of these organizations, like you said, it could light a fire inside of someone to say, well, maybe I could, be more of a leader at my child's school, or maybe I could serve in this local community. There's, and I keep bringing this back to my book right now, Carolina, because it's so in alignment. And in the devoted heart, which is the 4th heart stage, where we become more devoted to the inner world, there's a section called Never Miss an Opportunity to Serve, which was something that I read in a translation by one of a monk. And how he defines service, as you're saying, it's because life is right here, moment to moment, right? And it's like these grandiose things we want to check off a list sometimes, but it's moment to moment, living from your heart. So like you said, when you filter through your heart, what is the most loving, compassionate thing to do? Maybe you notice that person in the coffee, the cafe line is having a hard time. Maybe you let them go in front, or maybe you're extra kind to your child's teacher, or maybe you find a way to introduce a new project or at work, or exactly what you're saying. It's inspiring us to just orient towards service in the first place. It doesn't have to be these big things, but if you're inspired to do some of these things and these projects that could get funding, great. But it's also right here, right now, in everyone's lives, it's possible.
That's right. And I think that's so much of the suffering now, the human suffering that we feel, is people's feeling of helplessness, that they are not able to make a difference, and not understanding that, that's that same love or appreciation or recognition that you're giving to someone else, it comes back to you. It comes back into those own feelings of helplessness that you may have. And it's a lot of the reason, I've developed this theory around whole leader, because after several years of working with these leaders, and they're just extraordinary. These are people who are solving the biggest crises in the world, but for the most part, they're not turning it toward themselves. They're being of incredible service. They're giving of themselves entirely, and they're totally depleting themselves. And we're not getting the most out of them as leaders. And most of them cannot even sustain themselves. A huge report came out of the Center for Effective Philanthropy this past year about the level of burnout in nonprofits and social impact leaders around the world, and their teams, and that I think it was 3/4 of the nonprofits that were surveyed said, they were not able to really reach their goals because of the level of burnout that they were sensing. And
Wow.
you can imagine that's getting worse and worse with every new war that's being waged, and pandemic, and climate issue that's around us. And so the whole leader concept is really about how do we bring some of these tools that are ancient, that are from the wisdom traditions that, again, have been kind of co-opted and made into this capitalist structure. And so a lot of people eschew them, or they don't think that belongs in social impact because that's not for us. And yet those are the very tools that are so much needed in this impact sector, so that these leaders can stay in the work and they can sustain
Yeah.
themselves in the work, because they are getting burned out, and then their whole teams are getting burned out, and then we're not really able to reach these things. And I think all of that then cycles down. I mean, as a foundation, we live those values in the foundation. I bring those same practices into with my own team around meditation and mindfulness and pranayama I do with them. I've taught them all around breath work and on the team, not just so that we can benefit as a team, but we're modeling this to the organizations that win our prizes. And this is not typically how philanthropy has operated in the past, to have these deep connections and relationships with the grantees of a foundation is not typically how it's worked historically. And I think more than ever, it's so important because this beautiful idea of your book of these heart, the opening of the heart, that's where everybody sort of starts to feel more vulnerable and more seen and more able to connect, and then come up with the solutions that are going to help us all out of this really difficult time.
Well, what you're describing too, Carolina, with the burnout and the always on, what it shows is that these characteristics, what we would call the second heart stage, the propelled heart, like always in
Mm,
motion, always doing, very goal oriented. It can permeate into anywhere, right? It can permeate into how we mother, family life. It can permeate into the nonprofit world. We can have these really pure, beautiful goals, but it's like we said, the moment to moment living, and just coming in, connecting, centering, coming from the heart, this really regenerative place of energy instead of always just like our approach to things. So I love that you're talking about this more holistic way of being and the breath work and coming into these, because I see it too, where people start off and they have these, wonderful ideas, whether it's, teachers or in certain organizations, and they sort of, there's like a shift that
mhm,
happens along the way where their vitality goes down. And there is a different way of being, as you and
yes.
I know. There's a
Mhm.
softer, a loving, self-compassionate way of being. And there's a lot of lessons in there.
Yeah. And it's not a nice to have, it's not a luxury. And I think that's where we've kind of done a disservice to ourselves as a society, that, we kind of hide that we're going to yoga, or we kind of hide that, like, no, this should be a part of the wellness program of any company. It should all be integrated in a way and not separated. And I think that's where, again, I was practicing all these things in my private life. And as I was, this organization was growing and getting bigger, and I was understanding more and more about what was holding these leaders back. And just like around visibility, this was another big, wide open space that nobody was really investing in the impact world. This was There's tons of data. You're amazing at citing so much data about the evidence of these practices, and what they can do for our bodies and our longevity and our mental and spiritual health, but you don't hear those conversations in the impact space. And that's why
Right.
coming on to this and have this conversation with you is so powerful and so important, because I think we need to normalize this in the space of change making, where you're right, everyone's sort of just expected to just run themselves dry. And it's almost like a badge of honor to say, I've just been killing myself. I've not taken a day off in 3 months. And when what's on the line is literally someone's life, right? These are leaders who are representing refugees
Yeah.
in camps. These are leaders who are, I mean, like, they don't think they can take 5 minutes. 5 minutes means this group of people isn't going to make it, right? And
Right.
so getting them to be in the present moment, which again is antithetical to a lot of how our sector works, is so much like goals and what's your strategic plan and where are you going to be in 5 years? And it's like, let go of all of, like, it doesn't matter. None of that. You're not even going to get there if you can't learn to be here, and that has been to me, the greatest gift of this work is to be able to bring those teachings, the ones, that you and I have been studying for so long, into this world and say, not only is this not, you know, some luxury that we have to ask for and beg for, it is your human right, to have access to these tools, because especially for those of you who are out there saving the world, you more than anyone deserves to have this. And that shift of mindset is, I think, one of the biggest challenges for people in this work. They don't feel they deserve it for themselves, even though they're making space for everyone else.
Well, if we take that a step back about, deserving, I'm making the change, this leap to say, have worth to make a change, or I can make a difference. There's a confidence that flows through, this power and energy starts to come through, when we are in service. But
Yes.
surely there were moments of self-doubt or, questioning, like, will I be able to do this? Can I really make this happen? And how were you able to, back to the stories inspiring all of us, how were you able to overcome that self-doubt, that critic in your head, to say, I can create this organization and I can make change? Because a lot of people, before feeling worthy to, take care of themselves once they're in it, some of us don't even feel like going for it in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. I think that's so true. My method, and I'll be 50 next month. So, I feel like I'm entering this new, really exciting chapter of my life. A lot of it has to do with something you said earlier, which really resonated with me, which, what is that innate, talent that I have, that gift that
Yeah.
I was born with, that nobody else has in the world, and really lean into that, really like water that, nurture that, cultivate that, and not be afraid anymore that it's not enough, that it needs to have this, or, I'm a Latina leader of a global foundation. I'm like a unicorn. There's very few of me in the world. And so if I was given this chance to do this thing, I owe it to myself to do whatever I have to do to silence those voices that all of us, first of all, recognizing all of us have it, because I think that's part of it, is that we all think that it's only us, again, like we're special and we're not special. Like, everybody, has this self-doubt, not just me. And the older you get, I think the more you recognize that. Having kids, you see that in your kids. All of these things sort of mirror back to you, that you're not alone in this struggle. And so for me, it's really trying to stick with those practices that work for me, that help ground me and bring me back to some sense of clarity. But it's not easy, especially now that I'm undergoing, a big shift in my life, with menopause, with all of these things. Like, I have to kind of reorient. And I find that that's another thing in life, is that what worked for you 10 years ago isn't going to work for you now. You sort of have to recalibrate, your life, and what
Yes.
matters to you and
Whoa.
what works for you. And, like, some years need to be quieter and some years are going to be louder, and just be okay with that, with the seasonality of life. And even now, I feel like I'm in this part of my life where I have a big life. It's loud, I'm public, I'm out there a lot. But the awareness that I may not want this in a few years,
Yeah.
that
Go into
kind
a
of
different
fuels me
phase.
now. But it's in a
Yeah.
way, it fuels me now, because I'm like, okay, knowing I don't have to do this forever kind of gives me a little extra energy for now, because then when I'm on to the next thing, it'll be beautiful too. And it gives
Yes.
me, like, so I can give it all now. But yeah, the self-doubt is real. It's every day, and I think that's healthy to a degree, if you cannot grasp onto it too much.
So much there goes back to being present, being aware of the thoughts right now, breathing down, coming into this
Mhm.
moment, coming into our center, our hearts, our power in this moment. And that reminds me, Carolina, of a story that I read. A monk describing, when we're present, we're just in that river of life and we're flowing. But when we're trying to hold on to different phases or different things, it's like trying to hold on to the banks of the river, which creates
That's
that
right.
resistance. And that's where we start to get into, a bit of suffering or depletion or low energy.
Yes. And not, I also, this idea of, like, the more concept, I think that more concept really hurts a lot of people. This idea that this beautiful parable that I heard recently that has really stuck with me, of this fisherman who's sitting on the beach, and he's he's done for the morning, he's done his fishing, and he's just sitting on the beach quietly enjoying the morning. And this man starts, and he's running, he's doing his jogging down the beach. And every morning he sees the fisherman. And finally, one day he stops and speaks to the fisherman. He says, tell me a little bit about what you do. And he says, well, every morning I fish, and then I take the fish to the market, and then I'm done for the day. And the guy goes, well, but imagine if you went out a second time and got more fish, you could go back to the market and you could double the amount of money you make. And then eventually you could have a second boat, and then that boat, and then they would have a fleet of boats. And then in 5 years, you're going to have 25 boats, and you're going to have, and he goes on and on and on. And the fisherman's just quietly listening to him. And then finally he says, and what am I doing at this point? Like when I've gotten all these boats and all this success, and what am I doing? And then you can sit on the beach and just relax. And it's like, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
Isn't that incredible? Isn't that the method? Like, isn't that, the delusion that's so woven into the fabric of our society about more is more, this is the burnout, this is the constant anxiety. This is why, honestly, anxiety is, even in children, is at such
Yes.
all-time highs.
Yes.
It's just the mind and the ego going bananas.
Like it's not enough. And so with our leaders, it's, the same, it's telling them what you're doing is not only enough, it's everything. It's everything. And it's not going to be, don't compare yourself to somebody else doing something else. Again, this is your unique gift and your unique circumstances. And yeah, it's just a great privilege of my life, honestly, to work with these incredible people. They're so inspiring. And just to be able to, humbly offer some of the tools that we think can make a big difference to them. But in the end, it's like, what is our life really for? And so having any chance to be of purpose to others and connection with others is the most, it's really the biggest privilege we can have. And that's why, again, like this message that's available to anyone, no matter what your job is or your circumstances. And, some people turn to religion for that, but you don't need to. It's really how you build that sangha, that community that will give you that nurturing that you need. And I think purpose and doing good in the world is a shortcut to that feeling, right? You can get that rush.
I believe that you did some work with Mother Teresa, who I am connected to all different spiritual traditions, but I wanted to read this quick story that I have in the book and then reflect back to you with your experience with her. And this is in the clear heart. Like we were saying, Carolina, this is where service, can help us awaken the heart more, because we're expanding beyond the little me into the greater and the greater. And so after accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, Mother Teresa stopped in Rome on her way back to India from Stockholm. A reporter challenged her about the seeming futility of her efforts. Mother, you are 70 now, the reporter said. When you die, the world will be as it was before. What has changed after so much effort? Mother Teresa responded with a smile. I never wanted to change the world. I have only tried to be a drop of pure water in which God's love can be reflected. Does that seem like a small thing to you?
An incredible human.
Just this moment to moment living, moment to moment. How can we help? How can we serve? The smaller things add up to the bigger things. So it's so incredible, your organization, Carolina, and what you're doing. Is there anything else you want to share, how people can get involved with the Elevate, or anything, and where people can find out? But just, some last messages that you want to leave people with.
Well, with Mother Teresa, I did have this chance to work with her in Calcutta. 95. That was the first time I was in India, very young. And I went to work with her in Calcutta in the House of the Dying. I was volunteering there for some time. And what really impacted me, everything about that trip impacted me. I spent a whole year there, and I was doing a study abroad. But that time with Mother Teresa, I felt changed everything in terms of my perspective, like of what she was just describing, that drop, that you contain multitudes, like everything in the world is inside of you as one human being, and what one human being can do. I was in this hospital working with these women who were dying. They were there to have a comfortable and dignified end of life. And we were there to try to make that transition as peaceful as possible. And every morning, Mother Teresa would hold a mass, and everybody, all the volunteers, all the nuns would come and hold this mass. And, she was a small, very diminutive. I'm small, but she was even smaller than me. And she was just this force, this kind of, everybody would come. That's, I was 20 years old, and I remember feeling like I never really understood the power of energy until I met her.
Wow.
And I never saw it again like that until I met Malala many years later. But that kind of pure energy contained in one person that is so pure and so love. It's just pure love. And it transformed me. And I think, I'm a daughter of refugees, granddaughter of exiles. Like, I was never kind of in a place. I never felt that rooted in any real place. And I can tell you that experience was my root. Like, I was like, this is one I want to root into. I'm not a patriot. I'm not like, these other things don't really matter to me.
Yes.
I want to root in this. I want to root in love and in this kind of energy for the rest of my life. I will be looking for how I can do that. And so, building Elevate, and, that led to my entire career being in nonprofit and being of service was born in that moment, in that experience. But now fast forward to Elevate and a lot more experience. To me now, it's about how do we create these pathways for everyone to feel they can be part of something like that and that they have that inside of them. So for us at Elevate, it's about these winners, but it's so much about these communities. So a great way to people to find us, we're really active on social media, but we have a really fun award that we give away every month on Instagram. It's for grassroots organizations. So our Elevate Prize winners tend to be a little bit larger organizations, like in that million plus range, up to $15 million. But those grassroots organizations, those little, what my friend who's a funder used to call two chicks in a calculator kind of organizations, we're just very small, but are in the communities, they're organizing and doing that kind of thing. That's what this prize is designed for. It's called Get Loud. And every month we have a different issue area, and we invite the people who are following us to nominate an organization in that issue area. All they have to do is tag that organization. So that might be period poverty, that might be mental health. This month it's open right now, but the month of August it's going to be sports because we're inspired by the Olympics.
Right.
But every month it changes. So that's a really fun way that people can feel they're part of something. And that prize is $25,000 unrestricted to that organization, which is a big deal to a small grassroots organization.
Well, what's the Instagram handle?
So it's Elevate Prize. Elevate Prize. They can find it. Elevate Prize Foundation. And we also do a lot on YouTube and everywhere else, all the other social media platforms. But that Instagram prize is really special. And I think people have a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will link to that, everyone, directly in the show notes, as well as all more information and Carolina's direct website and the Instagram handles. Carolina, thank you so much for coming on here and just sharing your heart and your message and, these inspiring ways in which we can come into, I would say our true power is this loving kindness, this authentic expression of how we can really serve and put goodness into the whole energy that affects us all. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
No, and thank you for all of your work. I've been following you for a long time, and I'm such a fan of your health journey, and you've given me so many good tips myself. But I think it's incredible what you do and how much you put yourself out there in service of others. I mean, you really are the make good famous example. So I appreciate that, and really thank you for having me on, because these are the kind of spaces where we need to be talking about whole leadership and the importance of these tools for people who want to make impact in the world, because it's tough work more than ever. It's really difficult work, and we need to support each other and them in this work. So I really appreciate you giving us this platform.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carolina. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, you
too. Again, for everyone listening, the show notes are going to be over at myselena.com. We'll be back here Thursday, as always, for our next Q&A show. So till then, sending you much love from our hearts to yours, and see you back here very soon.
Thank you so much.
Stop.